Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's session. Really happy that you can join us. And we've got a few people on the call today. We've got Zoom, Cloud Gateway, Ape Census and Droplet. Before I pass you over to my colleague Simon Dobbs to do the introductions, I'm just going to run through some very quick housekeeping. So just to let you know, you will be muted, but you can submit questions via the chat box at any time. We will be holding a short Q&A at the end of the session so we can read those out and respond to those accordingly. Just to let you know, we are recording the session so that we'll share with all of you who have registered and you can play back just in case you miss anything and share with your colleagues. And then there will be a sort of feedback poll that will pop up at the end just with sort of 2 or 3 questions. And we do really appreciate your feedback on these sort of sessions. So it helps us to tailor kind of content and activities moving forward. So if you could just take a minute just to fill that out, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Without further ado, I'll pass you over to Simon, who's going to kick off the session.
Yeah, thanks, Cassie. Hi, everyone. My name's Simon Dobbs. So I head up our technical pre-sales team here at Bytes. And so we're just going to kind of spend a bit of time today, obviously, talk about the EUC kind of space and market. Before I just kind of do a few of my own thoughts, just run through the agenda for today. So first off, we will kick off with Ashley from Zoom, who's going to talk about how the guys at Zoom are helping other NHS organisations to deliver services to their patients. Obviously, Teams is the elephant in the room there, but Teams isn't right for every use case in every environment and every scenario. And Zoom is really helping other organisations to deliver out services to patients wherever they may be. And then next up, we'll head over to the guys from Cloud Gateway, who are going to talk about their SASE NHS SASE proposition that connects into all of the NHS networks. Here at Bytes, we've seen a real uptick in SASE projects over the last 12 to 18 months. The ability to converge networking and security into kind of one stack is kind of proving really interesting and beneficial to a lot of organisations, and drives massive benefits for both IT and end users and customers. And then we will chat, and then we'll head over to Kevin, who's going to talk about governance and risk reduction with machine learning and passwordless technology, which reminds me, I need to reset my password after this. Sure would all love to do away with that pain. Yeah, I'm interested. And then lastly, but by no means least, we'll go over to the guys from Droplet to talk about their kind of application delivery technology. Obviously a lot of NHS organisations, you've got some hugely complex, not necessarily hugely modern, yet hugely important, delivering vital services to your clinicians and your patients, but not necessarily the easiest to support, package up and deliver and roll out to your end users wherever they are. And the guys at Droplet have got a kind of pretty neat solution to help with that and take away a lot of that pain and make your life a whole lot simpler. So that's kind of the agenda and the running order for today. Like Cassie said, please do pop any questions into the chat box, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Before I hand over to the guys, though, I just wanted to, is that built up? Sorry, yes, it has. Kind of just talk about what we're doing at Bytes, and what me and my team are up to. Like I said, we're all technical pre-sales specialists with all technical background, and we spend all of our time talking to customers about what they're doing and how they're doing it and how we can help and what we're seeing in the market. And like every webinar that's gone before and will probably come after this for God knows how long, cloud is obviously a huge part of every conversation. And the kind of within my team, we've got cloud specialists, security specialists, modern workplace specialists, and we're talking to lots of customers about cloud adoption, whether it be that software as a service or infrastructure as a service in Azure or AWS or PaaS or whatever it may be. Lots and lots of conversations about modernizing applications and adapting to new services and technologies. and there's lots of good reasons for that. And when it works well, it's brilliant, and can drive a lot of efficiencies, improve kind of productivity, deliver out new services, get more out of your data. But by adopting these cloud technologies, you're literally picking up your data and your services and your apps and putting them into other locations and into other environments. And that leads to challenges and having to change the way you look after things from an operational perspective, supportability, and all of those things. But also, how do you secure them now they've kind of gone to in another place and they're more spread out than ever? And that's always a big focus for when we're talking to customers. But then it's also, you've moved all of your stuff, your data is now all over the place, but your end users still need to access it and they're still interfacing with it. And so it's really important that when we're looking at these projects, that we make sure that we take in a project and understand your landscape in its entirety. So we're not just focusing on wanging all of your stuff into the cloud and then moving on to the next thing. It's really important that we understand how we can help you to achieve those things, but also how do we help you to secure those things, and how do we deliver out a seamless and consistent performance to your end users wherever they may be, wherever they're working, and whoever they're helping. So it's all, me and my guys, we've always really focused on making sure that we're thinking about all of your landscape and helping you to deliver your apps and your data to your end users as consistently as possible. And my colleague Peter Ely, he heads up the modern workplace team here at Bytes. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it today, so you're stuck with me. I'm very much a master of none kind of person, whereas Pete really knows his stuff, and he's been working with the NHS for many years in the kind of EUC and modern workplace space, and knows his stuff inside out, understands how you guys work, understands the challenges that you have, and can work with you to kind of really help you kind of drive and deliver consistent and performant experience to your end users. So I guess after today, if there's a particular vendor or a conversation or something that you'd like to look at, or getting more out of your existing technologies and looking where best to augment with some of the great stuff we're going to see today, then Pete and his team can really help you to understand what you could be doing, perhaps what you should be doing, perhaps what you shouldn't be doing, and navigate through the market and help you to get things delivered and move things forward. So yeah, like I say, anything that comes up today, Pete and his team and the pre-sales guys in my team are kind of here, and really looking forward to working with you guys on some of this stuff. So that's enough waffle from me. I'll hand over to you, Ashley, to kick things off.
Thanks, Simon. One second, guys. Let me sort my screen out. Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction. So in this session, I'm going to walk us through how NHS organisations are utilising our Zoom platform in patient settings. And I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about Zoom usage in the NHS, and the fact that not only are we here to stay in the NHS, but we're seeing some significant usage across NHS trusts. So our last data that we ran last month showed us that 68% of NHS trusts are now using Zoom in a variety of settings, so 2/3 of NHS trusts. And there's some significant usage amongst these trusts as well, seeing 2.1 million meetings over the last 12 months. And a lot of this, I think, comes down to the fact that we've really heavily invested resource in the Zoom platform over the last 2 years, including getting some clinical certifications such as DCBO 129, the DSP Toolkit, DTAC, and ISO 27001, and also the way that you can procure Zoom in your NHS organisation through frameworks such as G-Cloud 12 and the DF OCVC. But what is Zoom doing in the NHS, and why is it being picked up by so many various organisations? Well, this next video will give you a very quick introduction to Zoom in healthcare, and then we'll focus on some specific NHS customers.
Have to be in the same room. the same hospital, or even the same city, to connect with someone, to care for them. With Zoom, you can overcome limits of distance and location to give people greater access to the care they need. One comprehensive platform that simplifies virtual care, from care delivery to patient education to the business of healthcare. Learn, share, and consult with medical experts around the world. Simplify and streamline workflows throughout your organization, connecting your teams with patients and their families. Zoom brings everyone together, uniting your entire organization around what matters most.
All right, so let's specifically look at Zoom in the NHS and in UK Health and what's going on. So again, like I mentioned at the start of this presentation, the fact that we've now got some very specific NHS accreditations in place means that our NHS customers can look at Zoom as a platform that is there and is a future-proof platform in the NHS. So having the DCB 0129 accreditation means in clinical settings with patients, Zoom's a platform that can be used to talk to patients, and it satisfies all of the information governance requirements that are necessary from an NHS perspective. And also, along with the DTAC readiness, it means that Zoom is really focused on having this platform that can be used in those clinical patient settings. Now, we often get siloed into this one little segment here, which is Zoom meetings, but the Zoom platform itself is a really quite a robust and comprehensive platform that covers a lot more than just Zoom meetings, which most of the world is now familiar and have seen. So we'll look specifically at how some customers are utilizing more than just meetings and how they're doing things such as using Zoom Phone, which is a fully fledged voice over IP platform, and connecting their existing meeting room spaces over Zoom Phone and using some of their older legacy endpoints, and that phrase sweat your assets, to make those older endpoints work alongside the Zoom platform to really empower teams to do more. Now, from a start to finish perspective, using Zoom, it's a really powerful platform. And this video here shows that whole entry point into what could be a hospital building or a GP surgery or just a standard office building. But it will show that journey from using the Zoom software coupled with hardware to give you that whole immersive experience.
As you all know, how and where we work is changing. So I wanted to show you all the things Zoom is doing to make it super safe and easy for you to re-enter the office. Even from the moment you walk in, you can get checked in virtually through our Zoom Rooms kiosk mode. Hey Dava, how's it going?
Hey Esther.
And then from there, they can do what's needed to make sure I can enter the building. This makes things like temperature checks super easy. In places like your hallways and your lobbies, you can push out really cool Zoom Rooms digital signage content like your capacity limits or your safety protocols. And then outside of your meeting rooms, you can see how many people are in the room before you even enter. And the great thing about this is not only are you providing your employees with valuable information, IT admins can check things like the CO2 level, air quality, and room occupancy straight from the Zoom dashboard. Once I'm in a Zoom room, I can start my meeting completely touch-free using voice commands. Hello Zoom, start meeting. Hey guys, how's it going?
Yes, sir.
So the cool thing here is it's leveraging AI. Zoom Room Smart Gallery is pulling the faces of the people in the room and it's pushing it as individual streams so I can have a better face-to-face conversation with them. You can also do things like pair your mobile device or your laptop so you can control your room camera, mute your audio, so you don't even have to touch the room controller. All of this is setting the stage for collaboration. So I can share my screen and co-annotate with my colleagues, whether they're at home or in the office, whatever device they're on. And then we can share straight to Zoom chat so that we can pick up where we left off later. We understand that managing hybrid workforces and re-entering the office is going to be a challenge. So Zoom is here to make that transition as smooth as possible. Thanks for your help, guys.
Okay, so examples of where this is really being put through its paces, and what a better hospital than Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. So at the start of the pandemic, they chose to roll Zoom out across the entire trust, and they did this in an 8-day period. And this is to 5,000 staff. And not only did they roll out Zoom meetings platform for internal and patient use, but they also integrated Zoom into their EPR system, which is Epic, and into their own patient portal called My Gosh. And what this enables them to do as a trust is it empowers patients to book video visits with clinicians. So that can be done through My Gosh, automatically scheduling Zoom meetings. But also from the other way around, it enables clinicians to stay inside of the EPR, remove any room for error in sending patient details out and linking details, all done through the Epic interface. And after surveyed, we saw that 95% of clinicians are likely to continue using this post-COVID. So a really good testament to the power of this platform. There's other situations as well where perhaps it's not Epic that you're using as your electronic patient record system. Now we have two that we have what's called one-click integration. So if you're a Cerner customer or an Epic customer and a Zoom customer, you can link the two through our app marketplace through seamless integration that's already been completed. But of course, there are hundreds of other EPR systems on the market, and trusts are using a variety of platforms currently. So our partnership with a company called Redox Engine is effectively a glue, a middleware between the two. So just because you're not an Epic or a Cerner customer doesn't mean that Zoom isn't going to integrate with your platform. You can absolutely do that through partnerships with companies such as Redox. Now, Spire Healthcare is a good example of a healthcare company that weren't using Cerner and weren't using Epic, and they've integrated Zoom into their SAP system. So not only are they able to utilize the power of Zoom as their internal and external collaboration tool, but for patient settings using the SAP EPR means, again, just like Great Ormond Street, they're able to simply click and schedule those sessions. But they're also utilizing Zoom Rooms. So where they had an existing suite of endpoints in their office buildings and in their hospital buildings, they can now use Zoom Rooms to make those legacy endpoints work harder. Now, the elephant in the room, so to speak, is how do we coexist with Microsoft Teams, and how can this work, and how do we work together? So we totally understand that Teams is, it's a good internal collaboration tool, and it's rolled out across the NHS. It's not going away anytime soon. But what we find is that the majority of our customers like to use Zoom for those external meetings where they're talking to patients, family members, or people coming into the organization, and they're using Teams internally. And by integrating Zoom into Teams, it means that they're able to maintain or retain that internal collaboration tool of Teams. But when they need to break out and speak to their customers, their patients, their colleagues outside of the business, the Zoom interface inside of Teams enables them to do that. And UDG Healthcare in Ireland are doing just that. And they're also utilizing Zoom Phone, which is a fully fledged voice over IP calling platform. So they're now able to escalate an audio call to video, but remain in that very sort of familiar interface. So some very specific healthcare features that our customers really tend to love. First of all, making navigation easier. So for our patients who are joining on a web browser, we have a simplified browser experience. So for patients who typically may feel overwhelmed joining new technology calls, having a link from the EPR system, click the link, join through the web browser. We've totally stripped back the experience here, so they can mute, unmute a line, start, stop their video, chat to their clinician, or leave the call. But we've removed all of the additional features that most of us are familiar with in Zoom, so that patients can focus on what matters most, which is talking to their healthcare provider. And from a healthcare provider's perspective, they're still receiving the full Zoom experience. The virtual waiting room is also a really powerful function in Zoom. So not only can we put patients into a waiting room and have them in that holding queue ahead of their consultation taking place, but we can also now serve video content to that waiting room. So patients aren't wondering whether they've been forgotten about or whether they are going to be seen. They've got their live video content being streamed to them, just like they would in a typical GP surgery. But also, as a host of the session, they're able to send a message to each of the patients in that waiting room to say, hi, we're running a few minutes late. We'll be with you very soon. but it gives a little bit more of that interaction, and it enables the hospital or the GP surgery to show specific content that could be related to the condition that the patient is here to talk about. And the final piece that is really powerful is a third-party integrations. And if you go to marketplace.zoom.us, you'll see we have over 100 specific healthcare applications that integrate into Zoom. And this includes things such as the EPR integration that we've spoken about, but also other third-party applications such as otter.ai, which will do your live transcribing. And there's also some very niche yet effective healthcare apps worth exploring there. So the chances are there's going to be an app that is already being used in your business, which is already integrated into Zoom. I've pretty much covered off everything that's listed on this slide here. So I'm not going to go through one by one, but just to pick out a few things again for you. Our NHS clinical compliance is a really powerful tick in the box for us. EHR, so EPR integration, medical device, again, really powerful. We've spoken about patient waiting rooms and end-to-end workflows and integrations. Yeah, I think this is why our NHS customers are tending to use Zoom in these clinical settings. Thank you for your time. Back to Bytes.
Thanks, Ashley. And then next up, Justin, ready?
Yeah, you just want me to go straight on?
Go for it.
No worries, right. Bear with. Hang on 1 second.
Alan from Lancashire, your background was very foreboding, that weather. Sorry, Karen.
Cool. Yeah, no, thanks for the handover there. I'll just make sure I've got access to being able to press left and right. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so would like to talk a little bit about what SASE is, what networks are, which I'm sure you probably know, and how that applies in the health space. My left and right not working there. So quick bit then about myself. I notice you weren't quite so self-indulgent in the previous slides, which makes me feel slightly worse. That's a picture of how I used to dress before COVID happened. I'm now delighted to announce that I wear jumpers and hoodies on calls like this. I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Cloud Gateway. My background has been in networking and network security pretty much my entire working life. I've been lucky enough to spend a pretty fair balance as well with private sector companies and public sector companies, and more recently in the last 5 or 6 years, been a lot closer to health organisations. As you can imagine, whilst I'm sure it's one of the many elephants in the room that we want to dodge and avoid, and we can't help it on a day-to-day basis, but COVID has very much shaped how we talk about networks, how we talk about IT, the consumption of services, Zoom being and Teams being wonderful examples of those. So getting much more close to the health market and involving ourselves with that, certainly in the last kind of couple of years, is kind of in par for the course. So I want to talk a little bit about SASE. We'll go into exactly what that is, talk a little bit about how that applies itself to health. What I would actually like to do is try and take that to a bit more of a philosophical level and sort of put some more provoking thoughts and questions out there as to what networking is and that requirement is, and how we apply that, and how we apply that in such a way that it can broadly work across all of the public sector and private sector organizations, how it can allow the consumption of those many services in the most important and useful way. So starting with setting the scene, what do things currently look like? I think it's quite important to understand where we are before we try and go sort of gallivanting forwards, because we've seen a lot of digital change, digital technology change in the last 5 to 10 years, particularly with things around cloud consumption, very bold and bright and extravagant applications, and all of these things are wonderful, but networking and the foundation and underbelly of what everything sits on hasn't really changed a great deal, a lot. Also, if we break it down to a requirements perspective, the actual requirements haven't changed either as well. We're ultimately looking for connectivity. We're looking for a secure connectivity as well to make sure that the passage of that traffic, the movement of that traffic from third parties, from organizations is secure. We can be comfortable with it, particularly if we're dealing with patient data or patient records or things like that. That in its own right is not ultimately a very new requirement. The kind of requirements that have changed are the way in which we wish to consume these. So from this perspective, what we're starting to see is wanting a more cloud-like experience around how we can use the foundation, i.e. the networks and the security, and not have to worry about them, because the things that really make the difference, as I think we know, really make the changes are the applications on the top. Networks and in and of their own right are not the things that are actually making the difference. But if they're not there, they're not secure, they're not stable, they're not able to cope with the major changes and the new demands of those things that are ultimately making the changes on the top, the applications, then they're going to fall short, they're going to fall foul, and they're going to stop the entire process of these deliverables. Now, something that's quite interesting here, and something I do like to talk about, is where industry challenges are quite similar. I think sometimes people believe that healthcare is incredibly different to other areas of the public sector, which in turn are completely different to areas of the private sector. But the truth is, the reality is that they're not. The needs and the requirements underneath that network, that connectivity, that security are all very much the same. The desire is to make sure that we can have that connectivity to those clouds, to those cloud services, back to legacy services, the ability to mix and match those types of traffic whilst we continue to move forwards. The desire to make sure that we can make those things happen very quickly. Of course, the best example in the last couple of years, everybody goes home all of a sudden in March 2020. We need to be able to get everyone connected. We need to be able to get everyone connected back to their home networks. We had exactly the same challenges, albeit for very different reasons, with very different outcomes, of course, with insurance customers as we did with health customers. Obviously much more important and pressing with health and because of the nature of why everybody's had to go home. But recognizing that there are actually key similarities is a really, really positive and beneficial thing. Trying not to segregate all of these areas of different verticals, different sectors is really important, because what it's allowed us to do is learn from all of the feedback, all of the mistakes, all of the positives, as well as all of the negatives across the entire spectrum. That will ultimately bring us to SASE and talking about SASE and how we can expand on that. So that's a really important thing for me, is recognizing that those things are loosely quite similar. The things that are subtle differences, the sort of nuances when it comes to this, when you're talking about healthcare, are things like the HSCN. There are also things like regulation, legislation, and guidelines. One of the most important ones for us, or maybe interesting or indeed fun, depending on how many times you have to read it and how often it changes or is interpreted, would be something like the Internet First policy. That policy has been interpreted in many different ways, particularly with application vendors and an understanding of how we put all of those things together. And what we've ended up with is a little bit of a sort of a spaghetti junction underneath all of this, with a mix of multiple private networks, multiple internet circuits and multiple different providers, and how these things are put together. So the HSCN remains a bedrock of what everything is built upon, and I believe it will be there and is very necessary for some time. But that really, as a private network, if we're going to just dumb that down, is the only major difference from other networks in other sectors. So that brings us to SASE, and that brings us to digital foundations. So I know it sounds probably like a kind of marketing term that I'm trying to popularize. That's because it is. Ultimately, what people are looking for now, what businesses are looking for, what industry is looking for, what public sector is looking for, ultimately what health is looking for, is not a network that's associated with the old, with things like big incumbent contracts, long tie-in, lack of innovation, very slow, things take 90 days, don't need that. That does not support the needs of getting those applications, getting those clouds, getting those vendors, getting all of those parties working together and ultimately delivering that benefit to the end user. The end user in this case, of course, is going to be the patient. So what we need to do with something like SASE, which in its own term is ultimately a framework rather than an absolute technology, is to be able to build a foundation. We need to be able to build an entire network core that people are used to, that does connect, does things securely, does all these things that they're used to. Again, those requirements haven't changed, but do it in such a way that it's much more cost efficient. It's much more technically scalable. We can add things to it. It can be compartmentalized. It doesn't just have to be this one big thing that we have to essentially guess the size of and the look of and the feel of for 5 to 10 years time to plan. That doesn't work. It's just the same concept and cloud-like experience as if you were to build a server or an application. It has to be that. It has to be able to adapt to change, and it has to be able to adapt immediately. That immediate evolution is ultimately what SASE is about as a philosophy, as a framework. So for example, where we would typically have seen things that are huge, overwhelming, multiple tens of gigs networks, they don't need to be that anymore. They can start very, very small, have a very small base of where their connectivity lies. So yes, it's still in data centers and all of that wonderful and interesting network paraphernalia that you probably know and love. And if you don't worry too much about that. That is still required, but it's that ability to grow, that ability to scale, being able to use a match and a mashup of hardware, of software, of cloud as the underlay to be able to bring all these things together. Whilst it's a tongue twister, I usually fall over. It's having the ability to deliver something tomorrow that you don't know you need today. That is a very, very important part of the next step moving forwards for connectivity and for security and for all of the components in that suite. The real changes, like I keep saying, the real changes that are made are the applications. I know that. Being able to deliver those applications quickly, being able to shave off months, years, is where we're going to make significant differences. And that is ultimately what we can deliver with something like a digital foundation, something built on the framework of a SASE deliverable, where ultimately we're looking, like I said, at that mix and match of software components, of hardware components, of hybridized components, and working constantly with the ability to look at what's new tomorrow and being ready for it today. Looking at those new clouds, looking at working together as well. I know previously we were laughing, I see at the Zoom and Teams and this that embrace of multiple options is actually really, really important. It's a huge journey that we've gone on personally with Amazon and Microsoft, and how they work brilliantly together as two of the biggest players in the cloud space, and being able to work in a more collaborative way at a technology level, not just at a vendor level, at a technology level, and not only gets the very best out of the technology, but that ultimately trickles down to the customer, to the consumer, and of course here, that would be to the patient. So all of these things ultimately are deliverables that fall down to those patient outcomes, to citizen outcomes, where we're looking at things in a slightly different light, being able to do those things. So if I just move on here, this is just a quick overview of exactly what this would look like from the perspective of Cloud Gateway, what we have created and how it works. Essentially, we would have some architectural building blocks that sit at the core of our platform. And like I say, keeping this very high level, these are component pieces that are already in place and can be consumed as and when and if they are required, and at a bandwidth consumption, a consumptive point that is required as well. So things like access to all and any clouds, on-ramp to a cloud fabric, which means as soon as a cloud appears, it's just there. Doesn't matter if we don't even know about it today. As soon as it's there tomorrow, bang, it's in. If it's about sharing resources with third parties, sharing resources across multiple NHS trusts, across different areas and geographies of the country. Then those pieces can be brought together over in the cloud area. They can also be brought together in a physical area. So something like the third party connectivity or multiple WANs, or all of these things can be brought together, and they can be brought together seamlessly, very quickly. That's where they would come together there. So giving two practical examples of what has happened in the last couple of years, and of course pertinent to health, I think I would cite QDoctor. So when we were in March 2020, and of course everybody's sent home, one of the things that wasn't necessarily thought through or had been thought through, or these were things that were in development and thus they were sped up somewhat, is how can I go and get a consultation with a doctor when I need to see a doctor, but I'm under being prohibited from leaving my house. Technology doesn't seem overly clever now, because we're talking about having a video interview with a doctor, but being able to do that and having the back of that from the cloud immediately connecting to any and all resources that were needed on the HSCN. They might be anything from patient records through to resources that still sat back in trusts or back in hospitals. That in its own right isn't particularly clever. Having a platform that's immediately scalable, connected, and the ability to deliver that in hours when it was requested is the difference. Now, we hope not to always have pandemics or reasons to have to go home such that we need to call upon that, but the reasons stay the same. It ultimately is being able to deliver that quickly means that we can affect it at the front line quickly, which means we can make massive changes. So that was something that we did very early on. It was called upon very quickly. It was a great opportunity for us to demonstrate what we were doing, what our principles are and the philosophies that we believe in, with laying a digital foundation rather than talking about an old sprawling network. And it's something that we work with QDoctor and others on all the way through to today, because ultimately nothing has changed conceptually. The second one for me, and I'll look to close out on that as well, is working with Xlab. So Xlab are one of the guys who were responsible for looking ultimately at the tests, looking at, for COVID this is, making sure that they look at the data, getting all of the results, collation of the results, pathology was the word I was looking for, and of course, again, this was something that they were already doing, but being able to get access to all of the necessary resources from an input, from an output, and when there was a challenge on a daily basis, you know, something that was not just on the front page of every newspaper, it's on the front page of everything in the world, it's on everyone's, the tip of everyone's tongue. Numbers were going up as well about how many tests at the time could be conducted in a day, and that was doubling nearly daily. The ability to be able to do that, you shouldn't ever have to be in a position technically where you worry about the foundation. And unfortunately, we still have an absolute ton of legacy foundations out there. The internet in its entirety, and if looked at just as a sole entity, is an old foundation. It really is. And that needs to move towards this much newer thought process of a digital foundation, so that we can make those changes, make them quickly, scale as we need to, and then come back as well if we need to as well. So I think my closing thought here would be around looking at the underbelly, the network, the connectivity, the bit that no one really needs to see on a daily basis, and considering exactly how you're approaching dealing with that, how you're approaching looking at that, and thinking that you ultimately need to be in a position where you can rely on it, be comfortable with it, but not just that it won't be on or off, not a traditional way of thinking with telecommunications. This has to be an asset to my healthcare organization. Now, it has to be the bedrock on which I can make real changes on a daily basis. So I would invite you to think about what approaches you're looking at there, how you're currently dealing with that, how you'd like to deal with that moving forwards. And it's something that you've probably sussed for yourself that I'm quite keen and confident on talking about. So I'd welcome any any conversation. And that is that.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, so like I was saying in the beginning, we've certainly seen across organisations in a big kind of sector that SASE projects are gaining interaction, like you said, and that ability to get stuff done quickly, not worry about it. It's beneficial. Cool. Next up, we've got Kevin from 8 Census. You ready to go?
Ready to go, Simon. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Pleasure. Let me just share my screen and we can get on with this. Okay, here we go. So my name is Kevin McNamara. I'm the CEO and founder of 8 Census. 8 Census is a global identity access management company. We've expanded our portfolio to include machine learning as a whole in a SaaS solution. For the purposes of this discussion, I'd like to really focus on Eve, which is the identity access management ecosystem. So our company services financial, healthcare, and legal communities. We have global customers. We're very fortunate to really have a ton of great partners like Bytes, who allow us to basically showcase what we have and what we do. So really, what does Eve do is the first question that most people ask. So Eve is an identity access management product. And what it does is we do 3 things. We fundamentally change the paradigm of what it means to secure an endpoint. We do it the complete opposite of the way most people do. So today, what you'll have is you'll have credentials, you'll have passwords, you'll have PINs, and then sometimes you have massive cloud compute that does a bunch of really creative and interesting things to try to identify usage patterns. What we do is we actually, we look at the behavior of a person. We look at the face, the shoulders, we look at the mouse movements, we look at the way that people use a keyboard, and we identify the unique patterns of that individual, and that becomes a credential. Now, what happens when you do that is you get this magical transformation. Instead of fiddling with passwords and PINs and all the things that typically people do to get into the session, and then once you're in the session, you can give it to anybody. It doesn't have to be you. We transform that into a sort of surreal experience. You pop in, you log in. I'm sorry, you just simply use the machine without logging in. The machine learning identifies you right at the start, and you have this really amazing experience where you have a multi-factor behavior assessment that happens in real time. And what that means is that when you get up from the machine, it locks automatically. What that means is if you're working on a document and somebody pops over your shoulders, it'll lock the screen. What that means is if you're a doctor at a public workstation, as a for instance, and you're using the workstation, you forget to lock it, the next doctor is then queried to log in with his or her authentication. So all of that context switching happens. We segregate the data. We plug in to Active Directory, and it really allows for a complete separation of duty. The second thing that I've heard in the discussions recently here at Bytes is really the notion that the office has changed. So pre-COVID, there was a massive push to basically work remotely as well as work from different points other than the office itself. And so that's become even more so prominent during the COVID experience. And I think will be here with us for the next foreseeable future. And because of that, we have focused also on privacy. And so privacy is really quite important. So what we mean by this is we are geolocation aware. We're aware of various security patterns that you should be aware of regardless of where you are. So as an example, if you're in a public cafe and you try to access an HR document or a medical document that should be ultra secure, we can work with you to ensure that that's not a good place for somebody to do that and lock the screen and ask the person to move somewhere else. All right, so privacy should be something that is, in our opinion, respected and something that should be something that you work towards with our product. Now, because we do this continuously, we're geo-aware, we use behaviors in a multi-factor perspective, then we get to a point where we have a complete ecosystem that provides a very unique experience. The last thing to mention that makes us universally unique is that we're continuous. Now, again, if you think about where most of the authentication paradigms end, they end at the 1%. You log in and then everything is wide open. With 8 senses, even if you were to leave those in play and insert our product, you get 99% coverage, but you didn't have it before, right? And that gives you some really great value immediately. And so we find with most of our customers, the first step in ingesting 8 senses is to simply just add that to the stack. And there's immediate value. Where we see tons of great value is at the remote access space. So if you're a clinician working remotely, as a for instance, if you're a contract worker, as another for instance, if you happen to be in public settings where you need to have an extended amount of security, that's another place where you see great value. And just to close out this point before I do a very quick demo, we have to make sure that that the audience understands that 8 senses is machine learning at the endpoint. It's a 5-minute install, and then after 5 minutes of installing, you have a 1 in 5 million uniqueness, meaning that you would have to pass 5 million people through the front of the screen at any 1 second to defeat the ecosystem. So that's a pretty significant margin. The second is that we're designed to revolutionize identity access. We deliver the secure workspace. We map behaviors in a multi-factor perspective. And then we also, because we can do all of these things, we can also tell you, and we can even certify up to the second what you're working on. So if you're working on a specific HR portal, if you're working in a medical setting, we can tell you when those things are happening. And we can also irrefutably certify that that person is the person that should be on that application at that very moment. We're enterprise, remote access, and contingent worker friendly. That's what we do. So I'm going to just switch context just for the moment, stop sharing. And I'm going to bring up a quick video and sort of walk through how we think about the install process, and just to give you a sense of how the process works. All right, so let's go here. Hopefully you can see my screen. So first and foremost, the install process is super simple. You can install 8 senses at the endpoint by GPO, SCCM, or script. Makes it really simple for enterprises to work. Secondly, the training process is, again, a 5-minute process that just requires a basic learning of the face, the shoulders, as well as the way the keyboards and the signatures work. So you can see it's exactly like this. In addition to that, we'll ask you some very basic questions to just invoke a response. We can get a sense of your typing speed, the way that the keyboard works, as well as the way that you favor keys. And then once that's completed, then you move to the next step, which is a basic signature check. This is where we look for inflection points on the way that you sign things. We look for behavioral patterns in the actual signature. So once that's completed, now you're BAU. And that's the training. Now you can take these trainings and centralize them so that you can span across multiple devices, BDI friendly, laptops, desktops, etc. And then from that point on, the actual AD is integrated into the machine learnings, and we now map you to AD, and it happens organically. And so again, the minute you get up, locks the screen. The minute you walk away, locks the screen, and the minute that somebody looks over your shoulder, locks the screen. And then we can create this really great geolocation profiles that become a really important point. So that's the actual demo in a nutshell. I'm going to just come back to this. And then I'll just finish this off with some use cases that we've seen to be very practical. So let me share this. Okay, I think we're back to here. Okay, so target use cases. So as mentioned before, we see a great amount of focus on remote workers. This is where we typically win. So imagine contingent workers, employee workers, where you'd like to see a sense of a real office. The office, again, it's not a physical place, it's a virtual office. We also are GDPR and HIPAA compliant. So nothing that the machine learning learns is ever transmitted over the wire. The important points here are that the machine learning utilizes the camera in a LiDAR fashion. So the LiDAR itself does not take any photos, there's no videos, everything's pure mathematics, and it's learned by the machine learning, kept there locally and encrypted. So that's just the camera, the voice, and the mouse and the keyboard behaviors are the same way. Again, with 8 senses, it's very easy to work in a coffee shop, at home, in a building. We also do context switching so that when you go from the unsafe to the safe areas, it will switch the modes and make it a little bit less active so that you can get a more seamless experience. We aim for a very simple solution. The shared workstation, as I mentioned before, allows you to have that context switching from doctor to doctor, nurse to nurse, etc., in a public setting. And it's AD integrated, matches within 2 to 4 seconds accuracy. So you would literally be able to look at something for 2 to 4 seconds at most, and then you have to switch over to the next session. So that's the two that I can think of that are relevant to the NHS. The other thing that is important to mention is that we have also plugged in via APIs to multiple financial and healthcare organizations. We plug into everything from syslog all the way up to ServiceNow and Splunk, as well as we've done Oracle feeds and message bus feeds. So we have a really good amount of flexibility to plug into existing ecosystems. And then, of course, last but not least, we can finish off with executive dashboards that allow you to remotely manage and control the endpoints for the best experience. So that's us in a nutshell. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, interesting stuff. I imagine it might take a little while for the security guys to wrap their heads around that, but I'm sure you're well used to having that conversation. So yeah, thanks again. Last up, over to you, Barry and Michelle from Droplet. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Barry.
Yeah, no, just unmuting. Sorry, just getting the presentation up.
Okay, cool.
Hopefully you can see the screen.
Yeah.
Cool. So you got myself and Michelle Laverick, who's our CTO, on the call today. We're just going to take you through what Droplet does for your legacy workloads in the main, but we are a containerization security solution for your applications on an individual level. So we're containers, not Docker. A lot of people start thinking Docker, Kubernetes when they think containers. We don't use Docker or Kubernetes in any of the solution. We are proprietary, our own patented code. And we really encapsulate a layer of security in an isolation bubble and enable you to run workloads wherever they need to be run, both on the client side for your end user applications, as well as on your server side containers. So really looking at workloads that still persist within NHS due to the challenges really that you guys would have around keeping patient data for beyond the entirety of someone's life, especially in clinical studies. You know, data has to persist an awful long time. And as Epic proved, Epic really isn't there and can't be the answer for everything. You can't just take data and transfer it over. In certain scenarios, you need to have the methods, you need to have those legacy applications that we use to be able to prove how something was achieved and something was done. So it's not a simple process to just move on with the times and keep things up to date. You know, legacy will persist for forevermore, really, in those kind of scenarios because of the nature of what you guys have and what you do. And really, we look to what we sell is that bottom line, really, is a security layer for application suite that gives you that compatibility and then allows you to go on and as some of the other sort of presenters have talked about, the compliance standards like DSP toolkit, like Cyber Essentials Plus, we can help trusts achieve those. In fact, we've had several trusts that do it. Our main referenceable side being NHS Tayside for a lot of what we've done to help them achieve their Cyber Essentials Plus with some of their legacy applications. And the challenge is there, as I say, you can't get rid of some of these legacy systems. It's not easy to upgrade. It's not easy just to move them forward. And you leave yourself open to these ransomware attacks, WannaCry being the most high profile in the UK of recent years, but as happened recently in Ireland, and it brought the whole thing down, even though they were given the key in the end from the hackers. It still caused massive disruption and a good 6 months of hassle. I think even some things are still going on now where they're getting back to normal, because even with the key going around all of those assets, bringing it back. So it can bring major disruptions, and disruption means lives in your world. You know, the more and more complexity you put around. Some people look at isolation as a layer on the network side, for example, and look to take assets off of the network like MRI scanners, and then you have an operational challenge to businesses, because it's no longer easy to get one asset from one side of the network to the other, and it brings operational challenges, which again adds to people not being had the time to either see patients or the time to save lives. So it becomes very, very important on that. Gartner have told us that there are 360,000 legacy applications across the UK government departments, and that would include some of the public sector within NHS. So we know that the issue is rife out there, but how can you deal with it? How is there a different way of getting the best of both worlds, dealing with this security and allowing you to future-proof assets that not only are legacy, but also modern assets that are alive today that may have complexities in install that may be challenging to support, or Droplet gives you a way to future-proof those. And this talks to the nature of what we do. It's being able to containerize up those applications into a format that we have tested by the NCC Group PLC as the last round of tests. We're going through actually a round of pen testing currently of the latest piece, but this has been deployed to military. We've deployed to nuclear power stations at EDF Energy, for example, to protect some of that legacy layer. We take the known good system that you have, we wrap it into this Droplet container image. Once inside the Droplet container image, you really have the freedom of choice of where you would want those applications to run. So you can use different platforms then, like typically what we see within NHS is they have a Windows 10 estate, obviously looking forward to Windows 11 because of the deal that's done with Microsoft. But you do have that freedom of choice with Droplet. Once inside the Droplet container, you can run your application estate across the board, either in cloud, on Azure, AWS, within sort of Chrome, within Windows 10, within Linux, or within Mac. So you really do have that choice of where you wish to run your workload. Within the security side of things, what we do, as I was talking about earlier, we're an isolation layer. So we actually block all inbound ports altogether so that nothing inside that Droplet container can be accessed from the outside. And we talk out to your network assets, so you can still gain access to your databases or your network drives or the assets that you need to save out on your network. But everything that's installed inside a Droplet container, all inbound ports are actually blocked. So you can't gain access to anything in there. We also control down to the nth degree what an end user can do and can't do. So they'll only be able to launch the application that you see necessary. And then from an outbound point of view, we say you can only talk to this server on this port, for example, for doing the job of that application. So you really lock down the security both on the client side, and then we take that forward onto the server side, which I'll show you in a moment. Again, expanding the where you can run and how you can run. We don't edict, even in virtual environments, you can run across Citrix. So BT would be our big use case within Citrix workloads, where they had legacy Citrix servers that were running an old version of Citrix 4.5. And they needed to go forward to the latest version, but the apps wouldn't run in the latest version of Citrix. So they were able to use a droplet container. And our container will work within AVD, within Citrix, with any multi-session environment. So you've got that capability of freedom of choice, as well as a way in which to run them securely going forward. We've dealt with several different applications across our time, but here's just a small selection that we've come across within healthcare. One particular one that we see quite commonly is TPP, and that being held in patient records. Certainly some hospitals and pharmaceutical kind of applications we've seen in lots of cases that are still on legacy operating systems. And there's a use case really to stop being held to ransom by some of these ISVs, in that to take it forward to the latest operating system, just so that it works on Windows 10 or what's coming around the corner in Windows 11. They will charge you an upgrade fee for really no feature benefit that would be of any use or any benefit to the organization. And therefore, it becomes difficult to justify those costs. And it can only really be put into the security banner of this is why we need to upgrade it, because it doesn't run on the latest operating system. The old operating system is vulnerable to attack, so therefore we need to upgrade. Well, Droplet really allows you to secure those applications away and not be held to ransom. So if the application is fit for purpose, and if it does persist, and the only reason to upgrade it would be to work on a modern operating system, well, Droplet can take care of that for you at a fraction of the cost, and allow you to future-proof that going forward, because we already GA'd on Windows 11, we'll be on 12, 13, whatever version it's from. And because of that isolation layer I talked about, we can run on every other platform as well, like Chrome or Mac. So you really do get that freedom of independence. It becomes about the business challenge and the business needs. Why does that application need to persist? And is that a good fit? Do we need to decommission it because it's not fit for purpose? Does it not do the job? Or is there a better application out there that does something that's more productive for your healthcare trust? And that then should free up budgets to be spent on some of the great innovations that are happening within the medical space, on new technologies that are able to be there from a collaboration and saving lives point of view. On the server side, we achieve the same sort of level of security. So we wrap a bubble of security around the legacy application side on the client, and then extend that across to the server side. And we wrap up in a container, in a droplet container bubble, the older operating system. So if you're still having to persist with Windows Server 2003, 2008, in the use case we have with the nuclear power plants, they're even putting the modern operating systems into this bubble. So we're not fixed just to legacy. They're also containerizing 2016 and 2019 server workloads, because they see the benefit of this security model that we call never trust, because we don't trust anyone. So once it's configured on the client side, on the server side, nothing else can get in. All inbound is blocked, as I said earlier, and we literally never trust anyone. So it doesn't matter if it's good traffic, bad traffic, or ugly traffic, it doesn't come into the security boundary. We encrypt the traffic between the client and the server, and only a droplet client application can access a droplet server application. So nothing else can get in there. And with this, from an audit point of view, all that you would be able to see on the client side is the modern operating system you're running on, be that Windows 10, 11, be that Linux, be that Chrome, be that Mac. And on the server side, it's actually a modern Linux distribution that houses our virtual appliance, either in the cloud or on-prem. With that, I'm going to hand over to my CTO and colleague, Michelle Laverick, who will take you through a very quick demo of the product. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Barry. So I've got a couple of environments to show you, and I think we're probably best starting off with the server side of the house, because that's what Barry just mentioned ago. A lot of our customers do run on their on-premise infrastructure, vSphere. As you heard just a moment ago, we can run our virtual appliance on Azure and also on AWS, but vSphere and VMware with its dominance, it does tend to be an awful lot of VMware. We do have a couple of customers who are also using Hyper-V in their environments as well. So I've got a ESX environment here, a cluster, and I've got 3 copies of our virtual appliance running inside vSphere. This virtual appliance was imported into the system using VMware's OVF and OVF format. Quick little wizard that brings the virtual appliance into the context of vSphere. And then once the appliance is up and running, it's a few steps to IP it, reset passwords, and it's ready for use. So on these 3 different appliances, I've got 3 different sample operating systems currently running. So I've got a copy of 2003, a copy of Windows 2008, and also a copy of 2012. We do offer our server appliance with clean images that you can bring your own data, bring your own software to, and install your software and use that data. But actually what more commonly happens is something we call a lift and shift, where we take an existing known goods server, whether it be physical or virtual, and convert that into the Droplet environment. A lot of customers, when they see our technology, saying, oh, this is very much like the Russian doll. You've got your vSphere layer and a virtual machine, and inside that virtual machine, you've got the legacy layer. And that's not a bad example to use. We're creating layers of abstraction, which allow us to then create layers of security. So in terms of an external audit, when any auditor comes in, they're going to see a modern vSphere environment with a modern Linux operating system. Yeah, because Debian is what we use, and we install our Droplet runtime into Debian. And of course, our appliance is being designed and hardened purely for that purpose of allowing that legacy system to be up and running. Yeah, all hidden and obfuscated on the network, so nobody can access it directly. So that's the server side. On the client side, we do a very similar kind of job. I've got 2 different clients to show you. I've got a Windows 2000, a Windows 10, and a Windows 11 environment. I know we've spoken a lot in this session about legacy applications, but we do also do modern applications that are containerized as well. So this is me running the very latest version of Word and Excel and PowerPoint inside the container. So we do get modern applications running in the container environment. The use case for that is applications, client-side applications that have been upgraded and upgraded until they eventually ran on Windows 10. But there's a high anxiety that if you ingest a new version of Windows 10 or apply a 0-day security patch, that patch or upgrade could then break that modern application. And then of course, we've got our friend Windows 11. So you might have gone through an awful lot of heartache and trouble to get an application to run on Windows 10. Do you really want to go through that process all over again, just because you're starting to ingest Windows 11 in your environment? But I'll keep the focus squarely on the legacy layer. So on this particular machine, I've got the client-side container up and running. I've got 2 little icons in my system tray. One is our client front end, which, to be honest with you, not many end users will interact with this directly. That generally ends up minimized to the system tray. And I've also got a session that's already pre-established inside the environment as well. Most of our customers, when they're running Droplet, they configure the container to run as a Windows service. So when the Windows 10 machine boots up, Droplet starts automatically. And then after the logon process, our client loads up in the system tray and connects to the container running on that system. So everything you're seeing in the Windows 10 environment is being driven by the CPU, memory, and disk capacity of the endpoint. There's no back-end brokers, security servers, gateways that you would commonly get with a full VDI solution. So we're really leveraging the horsepower of the endpoint here. So if I do a double click at one of these droplet icons, incidentally, these can be changed. I can run a legacy application inside the container. Now, in fairness, as Barry indicated in his introduction, it's rare that it's a shrink-wrapped piece of software like something from Microsoft, although we do indeed have customers running legacy versions of Office suites, often because they've got some proprietary plugin that plugs into Word or Excel that just simply doesn't work with the very latest version of Excel or Word. What we see more frequently is some line of business application specifically to a particular industry or a particular organization. So either an application which is used across trusts or an application which is actually a bit of a unicorn and unique to that particular trust. We call this experience where the user just does a double click and the application opens up Droplet Seamless Apps. So the user really has no idea that this legacy application is running inside a container. The look and feel of it is if it's running natively on Windows 10, when actually it's running inside the container. And it's that reason I keep our default icon in place, because if I change this icon for Excel from being the Droplet logo to being an Excel logo, you wouldn't be able to really tell that it was running inside a Droplet container. How do these two technologies come together? Okay, so I've got a container that wraps up the server operating system, the legacy server OS, and I've got a container that wraps up the legacy client application. Can those two instantaneously speak to each other? Well, the answer is yes and no. There's nothing stopping an end user cranking up a web browser, but in this particular case, it's going to try and fail to connect to my web server. And the reason it's going to try and fail is that I've yet to actually connect to what we call the Droplet Secure Network. Yeah. So we have our own gateway service, which users can authenticate to. And really what that gateway service does is not just authenticate the user, it also encrypts the traffic between the client and the server. Once I'm connected to the secure network, if I double click at that internet site again, you'll find I can get to my web page, albeit a under construction page from IIS version 6. So let's just step back for a second, just think about what we've done here. We've got a client-based application, in this case IE8, that simply will not work and will not function on Windows 10. Yeah, it is speaking through a secure tunnel across the local area network to speak to an equally elderly system, a 2003-based web server. And all of that is encrypted, both on the client side, server side, and anything in terms of data at transit. So Barry mentioned our never trust model. The way I like to explain that to our network admins when we speak to them is we're using the kind of technologies to secure traffic that you would normally use in a hotel or in an internet cafe, or if you were out, I don't know, at McDonald's and you connected to their Wi-Fi. With those networks, you can't really trust who's on that network and what they may or may not be doing. So we've extended that concept and driven it into the data center. So we don't trust the LAN, the internal network. We assume that that could be compromised too. And we encrypt the traffic on that network to the same degree as if you were working in an internet cafe in, out of Mongolia or wherever you happen to be. So if you like, that's how we never trust. We don't even trust the corporate network to be secured. There are some customers, when we speak to them about this particular model, who quite correctly say, is it the case that in some respects, a dropletized based application is actually more secure than if it was running natively on the network? And my answer to that is yes, precisely. That is our point, to try and secure the entire environment. So a bubble of security around the client, bubble of security around the server, linked together with an encryption channel. The last thing I want to mention is to talk about how Windows admins manage this system. So the Windows admin does not need access to vSphere, nor do they need access to our web front end, which is used by the Droplet administrator to configure the container. They can connect into the system as long as they have our client, and as long as that connection is open securely. There's nothing stopping them running RDP within a context of a container and gaining access to either the server's desktop, or if they were using something like SQL Studio, having a container that has SQL Studio installed to it, so they can, do some management. So the administrator who manages this legacy system really has no idea that it's running inside a container. As far as they're concerned, they're still connecting to the same physical or virtual system that they were using before. All that's happened is we've preserved its lifetime well beyond its end of life date that was dictated by Microsoft into decades beyond its original intended use. With that, I'm going to hand back to our folks at the ranch, because I think I've done enough in terms of death by PowerPoint and death by presentation. So back to Bytes. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, really interesting stuff. So that was the last of the kind of sections that we were going to go through today. I don't know if anyone has any questions that they wanted to ask. There's a few in the chat window. But yeah, do drop any others if you've got any questions you want to ask.
Yeah, pop them in. I know there was a few for Zoom in the beginning. I actually had one directly to me as well. I'll read that. It's one for Justin, actually, at Cloud Gateway. Someone said, how is your solution different to a service provided by someone like BT or Vodafone? Over to you, Justin. I'll just have
okay, just jump straight in on that. Yeah, so I suppose the major difference is going to be between what I would call traditional working, traditional networking and non-traditional networking, which, like I said, I'm trying to desperately popularize the phrase digital foundation. It's taking a completely different approach to how to use the technologies underneath to be able to promote that, say, that cloud-like experience for the technologies that require it on the top. I think the key really is, a question that's asked often of myself is what's stopping those guys from making similar changes and approaching it in a different way? And the reality is they would not be incentivized to do it. It's taking a model that also commercially would be vastly different, so that they would have to, if you build a scalable model, that just does not lend itself to a managed service that's built around something that is required to build and pay for something 5 years in advance. So it's very, very different in that approach, but the technologies that are used, the fundamental technologies, are very similar. So it's those like philosophical changes that are different. And yeah, it's something we're trying to pioneer, and I think we're doing well for the moment. So it's good.
Thank you, Justin. I think this might be a question directed towards Kevin when you were talking about your Eve product. So Alan's asked, how is it multi-factor? Sorry if I missed that. There's also another question from Alan, but I can't. You might want to rephrase that, Alan, because I'm not sure what you mean by use of camera by the apps. But yeah, Kevin, how is it multi-factor with regards to Eve?
Yeah, so Kevin had to drop.
Mike then.
Yeah, so I'll do my best. I guess the multi-layer engine learns the behaviors into multi-factor in real time, continuously through the session. So that's how we do it.
Okay, perfect. So someone's asked. Might have to be a question to take offline, because you may not have the. I think again to Kevin. So Mike, if you're able to help. So someone's asked, shared workstations in hospitals do not have cameras. So how do you train clinical staff and balance the potential cost of providing the webcams?
Yeah, so we use different methods of training in terms of the keyboard, in terms of the signature, and it also pretty soon in terms of voice as well. So we are aware that some industries don't even allow cameras, like in terms of security around the military. So we would use a combination of the keyboard, the voice, and also the signature.
Great. And just going back to previously, so back to Alan's question about multi-factor. What's your definition of a factor?
I'm going to have to let Kevin answer that.
Okay, well, we can come back to you, Alan, and we've got your email address upon registration, so we can get some the answers out to you directly. And there was also, so referring back to Alan's original question, so he's rephrased it. So if the camera is constantly watching you, how could you use the same camera, for example, with a Zoom call?
Yeah, we recognize that there's a Zoom call coming in. We would switch to the Zoom call in that instance.
Okay, simple as that. Okay, cool. So if anyone has any extra questions, please put them through. You can always email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk, and we'll come directly back to you. If you have any concerns or questions regarding today's sessions, please reach out to us. You can also speak to your Bytes account manager, or again, email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk, and we can put you in touch with a Bytes account manager. We'll be sharing a copy of the recording out to all those who registered today, and also a PDF copy of the slides that were used from today's content, so you have those. There is a poll that will be up or popping up for you to just answer, just with regards to feedback. We really appreciate that. And just one more, I think we've got one last question that's just come in. With Zoom becoming more used in the NHS, what is the plan to stop Zoom bombings occurring other than using settings when creating meetings?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So it's pretty much been addressed about a year, 18 months ago. Not only have we increased the user interface experience so it's easier to secure your meetings, we also have a team behind the scenes. So if there are anybody who are sharing their meeting details, which is usually how Zoom bombings occurred, they get notified that their session was not secure. There's also a whole heap of information on this link in the chat, which talks around securing your meeting.
Amazing. Thank you, Ashley. And thank you, everybody, for your time today, for joining us. And thanks to all those who presented. If you are interested in anything that you heard, please do reach out to us or make a note on the feedback form, and we'll be in touch with any relevant information or contact details and pass them on to you. Thanks again, Simon, for your intro. And yeah, I guess I'd like you all to have a great evening, and just thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers all.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks
for joining.
for organising.
No worries, thanks.